Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it happens to be where you're joining us tonight. This is our third instantiation of our Think Better series in this virtual world. Back in April 1st, when we did our first one, I confidently predicted that by this time, we would be meeting back together in person down at the Gleacher Center for our regular speaker series. And I could not possibly have been more wrong about that. Oh my gosh, how naive I was. If you've been a visitor to us at the University of Chicago or participated in a few of these talks before as an audience member, you can probably list a half dozen biases that overconfident prediction exemplified. That said, I'm confident that we're going to continue doing these speaker series as part of the Center for Decision Research going forward. And I'm certain you're going to enjoy these talks as well. This virtual format has been a good way for us to get lots more people involved in these talks than we could have. Otherwise, we have had over 4,000 registrations for this talk tonight alone. I'm also confident that we're going to be having additional online events this winter and spring. Coming up on February 17th is our very own Ayelet Fishbach, who's going to talk to us about self-control and motivation. She's working on a book as well, and I'm hopeful she'll talk to us a bit about that. And then Katie Milkman from Wharton is going to be joining us on May 20th, 2021. I'm not sure what she's going to talk about then. That is to be decided yet. I'm not making predictions about that for sure at this point. We're probably going to continue some version of these virtual events going forward, even once we're back in person, but we're not quite sure what that's going to look like yet. I can promise, though, and I'm certain that you're going to enjoy what you're going to hear tonight, because we're lucky to have Todd Rogers with us, who is just a super fun and interesting person to talk with. I've loved getting ready for this event because it's meant that we've had time to talk with each other and plan for this talk this evening. The goal of these presentations in this Think Better series is to try to highlight how behavioral science is being used out in the world to make a difference. And there's no better person in the field to talk about this than Todd Rogers, based on his research over the years. I first got to know Todd in 2003 when he joined as a PhD student in social psychology at Harvard. Todd stood out among our PhD students very early as being different in the interest that he had compared to our other PhD students. In psychology, we really spent a lot of time getting lost in the mind's weeds, trying to figure out exactly how this or that process works to shape this or that decision. But Todd really wanted to know how it is the world works and how we can use our understanding of the mind to really make a meaningful difference out there in the world. He wanted to understand what really works out there, what has big impact. And I'll sadly acknowledge that that interest is not exactly a great career path in psychology, because doing that kind of impactful work to figure out what actually works out in the world is really, really hard and painstaking work. But Todd got to work on this really early in his career. After getting his PhD at Harvard in 2008, he started a consulting group called the Analyst Institute, meant to improve voter communication and encourage more civic participation. After working in that for a few years and creating a successful business that conducted literally hundreds of behavioral science experiments in the field at the time, if not more than that, he returned to academia on the faculty at the Harvard Kennedy School, where he's now a tenured faculty member. He now studies things like how to help families improve student performance in school, where he started another venture called In Class Today to reduce student absenteeism. That's amazingly effective. He also studies how to improve democracy by increasing election participation and openness to opposing viewpoints, exactly the kinds of things that we need more of in the world right now. Todd could give us an amazing talk, I think, pretty much every week for a year if we asked him to, but we only have him for one night. And what he's going to talk about tonight is really a brand new line of research for him that he has not spent a lot of time talking about. So I'm really excited to hear about this work. And I think you're going to be really excited to hear about it. This work is focusing on how to help people communicate better and more effectively. One of the key insights that he's going to share with us is the importance of shutting up and saying less to communicate more. So I will shut up now and let Todd take over. Todd, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're so grateful for having you here.
Thank you, Nick. It is a real pleasure and honor to be a part of this. I'm not going to make any predictions about the future, but what I can look backwards and say that I have here a mug from the Self and Social Judgment Lab, which was Nick Epley's lab as of 2003, 17 years ago, and it still works. So, so what I'm going to start with. The talk is called "Fewer Words, Please." I think it makes most sense through biography to begin with. It started with this organization that Nick was describing called the Analyst Institute, where we translated behavioral science insights into political strategy for the left, and I co-founded it. And we ran hundreds of large field experiments, and one of our big challenges was getting organizations to work with us. So whether it's a political campaign or a 501c3 or C4 or PAC or any other kind of political or civic entity. And I quickly learned that in these organizations, no one's job is to reply to my emails, and no one's job is to ever get back to me. And so we shifted. So I realized that my job was to get people to reply and hopefully collaborate. So we started a rule at the Analyst Institute, which was that no email should be more than 5 sentences. And then when I moved back to Harvard, I started a lab where we work with school districts around the country, dozens or even hundreds of school districts, including at a time Chicago public schools and New York and LA and lots of other Philly, lots of other districts. And similarly, to my surprise, no one in those districts had it as part of their job description to reply to my emails. And so we went from a rule at the Analyst Institute of 5 sentences max, we went down to 3. No email could be more than 3 sentences long. That means anything else needs to be below the signature. Here's what the point of this email is. We're asking for this, more information below, or an attachment. And then I started Everyday Labs, which is the new name for In Class Today, which is a company that helps districts around the country reduce student absenteeism at scale. And similarly, a big challenge is to get people to reply to our emails. And so there's sort of this, and I am not advocating 3 sentence max email cap. That is not the takeaway of this talk, but it was sort of an internal heuristic so that we could become more effective communicators. But this whole just intuitive process that we developed to try to get people to respond and seem to have some evidence for became more central as the coronavirus came around, and I started receiving hilarious / tragically long emails from every organization I have any association with, whether it's as an advisor, an employee, a customer, a friend, a member, or an ally. Every organization was sending lots of emails that were extraordinarily long, and I tried really hard to read them. But I can probably count on one hand, and maybe less than one hand, the number of those emails I made it all the way through. And they were all extremely well intended, and I think I agreed with most of the things that they were saying. So I wrote an op-ed, Why No One Is Reading Your Coronavirus Emails, and then started doing more research in school districts on this. And recently wrote an op-ed, Write Less to Say More for schools, and developed this program of work over the last couple of years, and the coronavirus really crystallized it. So one of the things that I asked this group on the webinar right now to do was send me some absurdly long emails you have received. And I am not going to name this person to protect him or her, but this is one email that they received. I pasted it into mine so you could see the format. And it is from a chair of a group that this person is a part of, clearly to a big group. And it proceeds to, this is about a third of the email. And it's unclear. I was telling the team before this meeting that it took me maybe 10 or 12 minutes to read the email. Then I had to decompose it to figure out what the point of it was. And then I tried to write it better, and I ended up giving up on the effort. But I think I want to use this as an example of it's worth being clear. What's the point of the words in your communications? Is it to entertain, to be leisure or amusement or entertaining reading. In college, I could not understand my really smart and sophisticated friends reading the New Yorker, because I would read it, I would try to read it, and then I would feel like they didn't respect my time. And it was just like I could summarize it in a 150 word abstract, and I didn't understand why it was so many pages. But I realize now that the purpose of that communication was not efficiently translating information from them, from the author to me. It's entertainment and information conveyance. Is it to document or record some kind of past event just so we have records of it? Is it symbolic to show that you care? I realize now that a lot of the emails that we received were long, like deep, really thoughtful essays that were, I think, mostly symbolic, because I think the way it was written conveys they did not expect us to actually read it. That it was written in extremely careful, beautiful prose. But if the goal was for the hundreds or thousands of people who were receiving it to understand it, they would have written it as if it was to be understood, and by people who are hurried and out of time. Or is it to communicate something? Are you sending texts or emails to say something, maybe even prompt a specific action or two? So that's the purpose that I'm going to focus on. So if we're trying to actually communicate something to someone and we want them maybe even to take an action, how do we most effectively do that? That's what the focus here is. And so a question that I frequently get is, why don't I read my email? And I always intend to. And if you, and I know there are people on right now whose emails are in my inbox, and I'm sorry, I'm trying, but I know I'm not the only person. And I know I'm not the only person people get angry at for not getting through their emails. And so I just want to, this is the only slide that looks like an academic slide. I'm just going to list some of the reasons why me and maybe the small fraction of you that probably represents the majority are not on top of your inboxes. According to McKinsey, the average person gets over 120 emails per day and spends about 28% of our workday doing emails.
Hey, Todd, we can't see your screen. Were you intending to share it?
Yeah, I thought I was showing great slides. Oh, oh.
Your perspective is different from ours. There you go.
Nope. Oh, got it.
There we are.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I guess it wasn't that. This is what the opening slide looked like. Fewer words, please. It was in the prayer gesture. I said that I coronavirus, and then here's an example of the email that I was talking about, and then we're all caught up. Here's the example that one of you generously shared, and I appreciate it. I will not name you, because if we revisit it, it is you succeeded in getting a really terrible email to me. And so why don't you read your email is a question that people will ask. Reason for, and this is a sort of just the only slide that's going to look academic-ish. The average person gets 120 plus per day. They spend about a quarter of their workday responding to emails. Time, 48% of US adults report not having enough time in the day. Basically, there's this time poverty. And so we are all, the majority of people are extremely busy and running out of time. Here's another one that I think we need to be attentive to. English literacy. According to the Department of Education, the Institute for Educational Science, 14% of American adults, or heads of households actually, are below basic literacy in reading. And so what that means is they can read out, they can read a form, but they can't comfortably read out loud or comprehend reading when reading out loud. 21% of Americans speak non-English language at home. So why do people not read their emails? We get a lot of it. We don't have enough time. A lot of people struggle with literacy and English, and we have limited attention, extremely bounded attention. The amount of attention that we have is constrained, and it gets allocated across lots of different things, and we're easily distractible. And when we focus, we focus systematically, selectively on things. So our attention is drawn to specific items as we sort of scan the visual field. And I think all of this, everything I'm concerned about with our communications, I happen to focus on communicating to families, especially families in large urban school districts. which are disproportionately Black or people of color, which are disproportionately low income. And the thing that I am particularly concerned about is how do we help the most vulnerable families? And under and in the current environment and in all environments, vulnerable families are under the most household stress and pressure. And under those conditions, people are their attention is especially narrowed. This is research that Sendhil Mullainathan and Anu Shah at Chicago pioneered about how attention gets focused under stress and time pressure. So all of this there are a lot of reasons people don't read their emails. But then when we get to actually the emails that are badly written, there are two problems with it. Emails that are like just sort of not effective at getting the information conveyed when it is prompting or calling for an action. The first is often, and this happens to me too often, these communications aren't read or acted upon. So e.g., see your own inbox and look at all the things, the emails that you are feeling guilty about not responding to. But if they are read, and this is a little more subtle, if you write a terrible communication to somebody that takes too much of their time, if they are read and acted upon, you're basically shifting your editing time to a recipient's reading time. So that if you could have cut 30 seconds of reading from the recipient's inbox, and let's say you're communicating to a large group, to 100 people, that would, I'm gonna get the math wrong, I think that's 50 minutes. You basically, by not editing it down by 30 seconds, you are imposing a 50-minute time tax on your recipients. So it's unkind to write poor communications. And from a welfare standpoint, the total welfare cost, especially the larger your audience, the more time tax you're shifting off to other people instead of yourself, the more you're reducing social welfare. I am inspired often by this quote by Blaise Pascal, and this is called French script. I would not normally use it, but he is a French scholar of multiple disciplines. He wrote to a friend, "I am writing you a long letter because I don't have time to write a short one." And I like that. That's self-awareness, that the editing process, if he had had more time, he would have written a shorter one. Now, I had more time, so I wrote a shorter one. With more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And so we cut his 17 words down to 10 words. But the big picture is, with more time, he would have written fewer words because it would have been clearer, more effective, and saved his reader time. I'm going to show you now a bunch of experiments that illustrate the 4 principles that I'm going to try and pull out of how we can be more effective communicating. And one is fewer words. So here is a couple months ago, we ran an experiment where we emailed about 7,000 school board members, basically members of local school boards, often who are elected. And I wanted to do a survey. So I wrote this long, what I thought was a pretty sensible message. This is the best one that I could write at the time, 127 words. And I'm emailing them and I'm asking them to take this survey link right down here. And then Jessica Lasky-Fink, who's my collaborator on this project, this bigger project on fewer words, please, she suggested maybe we should cut the words down. And I thought that was a great idea. So she just got a pen and cut the words in half, just eliminated the whole middle section. And cut my 127 word email to a 49 word email. Just removed words. So then we ran an online study where we asked a couple hundred participants which email they thought would generate more survey response, like more people taking the survey we were asking them to take. So more responses. And 67% of people thought the longer email would be more effective. Okay, so then thank you to the hundreds of people in the Think Better community and people who registered for this. We asked you all, we gave you this email and we said, how would you improve it? How would you make this better? And we gave an open-ended text box for you to write an email that would prompt a response using this as an anchor. How would you improve this? And 72% of Think Better participants, registrants who registered for a talk called Fewer Words, Please, added words to the email, this B email that was the more concise version. So it's about 20% wordier was the average length of the revised email based on the Think Better community. So what I'm going to show you now is the actual results. We randomly assigned these 7,000 school board members to get different length emails. Remember that general public predicted the longer one would be more effective. I originally wrote the longer one as the best I could write to be effective. Think Better members or participants in this added words to my longer one, thinking that it was too short. And what we found was that the response rate of the long one, the A version, was 2.7%. 2.7% of school board members responded and filled out the survey. And then shortening it by about half, almost doubled the response rate. So just cutting, remember, it was the exact same text, we just cut the entire middle part out. That is an illustration of the sort of bigger point that is just fewer words. I'm going to go through 4 of these sort of principles, and then Nick and I will take some of the questions that were submitted. This is a clean illustration of just more words. I did another project in California with Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General in California before she was a senator, and Hetty Chang, Carly Robinson, and again, Jessica Lasky-Fink, where school districts in California and around the country, when a kid misses like 3 days of school or some standard number of days, the district is required to send a letter to the family. And often the state legislature mandates what that letter has to look like. And so in California, this notice of truancy, which is what it's called, was 350 words written at a college reading level. And pretty sort of incomprehensible when you read it. I'll read the first sentence. Good attendance is important. California Education Code section 48260 provides that a pupil, a child, subject to compulsory full-time education or to compulsory it is clearly not written for humans. It was written only for lawyers by lawyers. And it was sent in the school district that we work with. It's sent to hundreds of thousands of families a year. Throughout California, it's sent a million or more families a year. So with Kamala Harris, and the reason we need the Attorney General is because it's mandated what this needs to look like. We rewrote it. We cut the words. We turned into a 5th grade reading level. We cut the words by more than half. We moved the mandatory language down here. So we used formatting to make it really clear, like, what is your visual process as you look at this? You see what's in the box. And we went from 7-point font to 14-point font. We cut the words to 150 words, and we changed some of the content. But the core of the content is the same. The core of the content is you missed these specific days and you need to be in school. And we found was that reducing it increased the impact of the notice of truancy by 40%. That means rewriting this letter that goes out in this district to 150,000 or 200,000 families. We had 150,000 in the experiment, and statewide it's a million or more. Rewriting it reduced absences in the subsequent 30 days by about half more effectively than the standard letter. Okay. And the key here is, we think it's both reducing words, but also changing the reading level, making sure that it's written at the grade level that is low as possible. And that is not just because of literacy challenges, because people are busy. And what you want is skimmers to be able to understand what's trying to be said. It is hard for a skimmer to understand what this is about, whereas a skimmer can understand this. So in addition to fewer words, write at the lowest possible reading level. And a reading level, there are lots of standards for it, but Flesch Kincaid is a sort of standard scoring system. And we lowered it to the 5th grade reading level. So fewer words, decrease reading level. And formats reinforce purpose. I think that's a really important and sort of often lost element in these discussions. I focus more on cutting words because I think there are just way too many words. And frankly, it's unkind to use too many words to your reader if your goal is to make sure they understand and take an action. But formats reinforce purpose, right? So the formatting helped us get to directing attention to the key information about attendance. So I want to talk now a little bit about how to highlight, which is a part of this process. So we talk about fewer words, we talk about decreasing reading level and formatting to reinforce purpose. So I searched online to find a paragraph. I searched most boring paragraph ever, and I wanted to use this to illustrate how highlighting works. So you can see here that I've highlighted everything, and it resembles a draft of an email that someone sent me a couple of weeks ago, where they highlighted, I think, about 2/3 of the content. And what it drew my attention to is that if everything is highlighted, nothing is highlighted. And so the idea is formatting done well actually is like mindful of the user experience, the sort of the recipient of your communications. And we are reducing words, we're reducing reading level, and we're using formatting to reinforce the purpose of the communication. So I'm going to show another experiment that I did this time with the company we spun out of my lab that reduces student absenteeism around the country. It sends millions of absence reducing communications to families every year. And we were working with a school district this past fall, so this fall. And I guess during the summer. And they're saying, thank you for participating in the summer program. Please answer this 1-minute survey to help us improve our program. And then the Survey Monkey. And so what we want to do here is we want to sort of think, how do we maximize the likelihood that someone who is too busy to really read all 20 of these words? And I know that may sound crazy, but the idea is I know that I have text messages in my SMS inbox when they are more than one little module, I say I'll get to them later. So how do we make it as easy as possible? The purpose of this communication is purely to get people to fill out the survey. So what we do is we break out the survey separately, and we send them out as separate messages. The goal here is to make it easier for someone who's skimming to understand the action that we're asking them to take. And so we remove thank you for participating in the summer school, make that a separate message, and basically we let text message be the formatting. And now the second message is its own sort of mental unit. And we say, please answer this 1-minute survey. And so we find we have a 7.9% response rate with when it's all in one. These are 7.9% of people respond to the survey. And then when there are two separate messages, we increase response rate by about 15%. So the same number of words, all we're doing is we're splitting it out so that we are helping manage people's attention. So the gist of this one is being really clear on what the purpose of the communication is. What's the goal? And if the goal is to get people to fill out the survey, make sure that the formatting reinforces the purpose and that we are communicating clearly what our goal is. So fewer words, decrease reading level, format to reinforce the purpose, and then be clear regarding the purpose, as clear as possible on what is the purpose of the message. And so I think when Nick and I have a discussion in a few minutes, answering some of the questions that you all have proposed, we'll talk about this. Even extraordinarily long emails that have lots of functions, reporting, asking for volunteers, reporting how a meeting went, all those things. The very beginning, for someone who's skimming and time rushed and wants to look and see, the very beginning can be clear. Below, I have these 3 things. I need a volunteer for this, and please respond about this date. The very first 3 sentences could address what the purpose is, even though the email itself is super long. So the natural question is, why don't we write better messages? I asked, why do people not read their emails? And we talked about time, we talked about literacy, we talked about attention, and I can't remember what the other one. Oh, and then amount of email. So why do people not respond? The other is, why don't we write more effective communications? And really, this is a question about how good are we at taking other people's perspective? I am writing this long, thoughtful email where I have spent perhaps 20, 30, 40 minutes on it. It's long, it's 800 words. It is grammatically correct. Some of the sentences are really beautiful, like parentheticals, and it's grammatically correct, and it really flows. And I'm thinking, I spent so much time on this email, you're probably going to spend that same amount of time reading it, or at least read the whole thing, or at least care about it. And what it really is a misunderstanding of other people's lives and perspectives. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because this is not really my expertise. But if you want someone whose expertise it is, my counterpart on this webinar, Nick Epley, actually wrote a book exactly about this topic, why we misunderstand what others think, believe, feel, and want. So there, Nick, I've got a shout out to your book. Read it. It's an award-winning, really excellent book, but it really addresses this question of why are we so bad at understanding the perspective of other people, which I really think is the foundation of why we are so poor at communicating, understanding the situation of other people. If we're trying to convey information right now, more than ever, I work with school districts. There's all this urgent information that needs to be passed out. And too often it's buried deep in people's inboxes under paragraphs and paragraphs. I have, I will say, a friend of mine sent a kid to a school where the school had a parent liaison, and the parent liaison spent a week, every week sent a 7-page newsletter about what was going on in the school. And this friend of mine went up to this person and said, I worry that people aren't reading a 7-page weekly newsletter, and I've skimmed it and it looks like it's really nice. Why don't you, on the 6th paragraph of the 5th page, put this sentence: if you are reading this, come to my office on Monday and I will give you $50. Just because I wanted to, this friend of mine wanted to free this woman up to spend her time on things that might be more productive. And a 7-page weekly newsletter, even if there's urgent things buried in it, not the most effective. So in sum, fewer words, please. This is not, and we receive questions on this, this is not to say that an email needs to be 3, 4, or 5 sentences. But the idea is every additional word is a tax you are imposing on your reader. It is unkind to not edit out to protect people's time. 2, decrease reading level, same logic. 1, especially for the communities I work with, like we care the most about the most vulnerable families in a lot of our communications. So we want to make it as accessible as possible. But for everybody, even University of Chicago graduates who can read it, at college and beyond, decreasing the reading level just makes it more accessible, easier for people to process under the various stresses of time and whatnot that we have. Format to reinforce purpose. With more time, we would talk about how to use bullet points and the logic of different structures of highlighting. But the high level is really the psychology of it. Is people are skimming, and you want to manage where their attention goes. The same reason I do reveal when I do PowerPoints. I want you to look at the thing I'm showing you right now. So now I'm showing decreased reading level, and now format to reinforce purpose. You want to manage the flow of their attention. And finally, be clear regarding purpose. What you don't want is to have a question buried in paragraph 3, a different question buried in paragraph 4, and then a different question in paragraph 9. And someone who opens it, the first 2 paragraphs are, what a great time we all had the last time we got together. There's just no, unless you are comfortable with people not being very responsive. If the goal is to get people to respond, it's important to be very clear up front. Could be in the subject line, could be in the opening paragraph. And with that, thank you. I do want to make one request. Please send me mass emails that you get from your deans, from your bosses, from organizations you're a part of that are like terrible, or if you need a rationale for why you shared it. They're not optimal and you're looking for improvement, because I am always interested in great examples of terrible emails. And with that, thank you.
Wonderful, Todd. You can stop sharing your screen and then we'll talk for a little bit and we can go back and forth as needed. So one thing that just sticks out for me is that we communicate all the time. Like we are constantly communicating with other people. And one of the things that psychologists often hear about economists is that it's surprising that sort of people's erroneous perceptions continue and are sort of stubborn. It's hard to get rid of. if we're doing these things so often, and it's important. Communicating well is important. We do it every day. And yet we don't seem to learn how to do better. Why don't we learn from this? Why don't we learn to do better?
The one immediate answer is this perspective taking. Like I spent a lot of time editing the email to make sure the sentences are right. And then I'm shifting the burden to you. It's your what's the word? Recalcitrance. Is that the word?
Mm-hmm.
For not responding. So the bird I've shifted, in addition to shifting time burdens onto you by my not cutting words, I've also shifted responsibility for responsiveness onto you. That's one thought. Another is emails do serve lots of different, I mean, emails or text message. I hear I'm focused on digital communications. They serve lots of purposes. And we talked about in the beginning. One is like to entertain when you have time. Another is to put a flag in the ground to say, this is a topic I care about, and I want to cover my ass when it eventually becomes like if there's any future follow up. But if the goal is to prompt people to take action, then we should especially focus on how do we make it as easy for people as possible to do it. Your question of why we're not getting better, maybe we are getting better. That would be interesting.
I mean, I think another challenge is we don't often get a lot of feedback. Like, you don't know when you send out that terrible email that you would have gotten an 100% better response rate had you cut it in half. You just don't. I mean, we can learn that from conducting experiments, but in your daily life, you live one condition, so you don't see what the other conditions are in your life, and so you don't get a chance to learn. You don't get good feedback.
That's interesting. I was going to say we do get good feedback in that the phone not ringing is the person not responding, but we don't know why they're not responding. So you're right. I've been working with we'll say a large political consulting organization that sends fundraising emails for candidates, and we're about to run an experiment where they write a multi-paragraph email that they normally write, and then I randomly cut a paragraph for different people. We've even talked about randomly cutting sentences, so the sentences no longer flow together, and they also share the prediction that maybe that would be more effective. But like because they run A/B tests on everything, they run I'd say 10,000 experiments over the last 10 years or 5 years, but because they haven't isolated the short long, there's no reason they would migrate to the the optimal frontier on length. They're testing like, do I say "hey" in the subject line, or the President Obama wants whatever. So they can learn, but they're not going to like migrate to the optimal frontier without explicitly testing his hypothesis.
A/B testing works as long as you're manipulating the right A's and B's, and if you're not, you don't learn. You don't necessarily learn.
Right, but you may accidentally stumble into
like
something that approaches optimality, but you won't even know why, because you're sort of migrating in that direction atheoretically.
Yeah. And
so I'm sorry I said atheoretically, Nick. I'm sorry. I don't want to pretend for a second this is particularly theoretical.
Well, other psychologists will work on that. So we received, I will just say to the audience members here on the talk, we received no less than 19 single-space pages of questions for you, Todd. So I'm not asking you 19 single-space questions, and I want to apologize for all of the people who submitted questions that we're not going to be able to get to. Please don't engage in conspiracy theories about why we're not asking your question. It's just we got a lot of questions. So I tried to bucket them into a few different buckets that were consistent themes that we saw in the questions. One was this: why are we not getting this right? You already touched on that. But there were a lot of questions about how to do better. Like, how do I write better? And you asked if we could have some of the audience members send in examples of terrible emails, communications that they receive, or other communications. And I know you looked at some of them, and I wonder if you could give us just some practical guidance on how to put the principles you highlighted into practice with some of these.
There are just heuristical rules. If people are interested in leaving with like a shorthand, the shorthand is try to cut a third of the words and see if you lose any substance at all. And so that my feedback will often be, which I have people in my lab probably either on this now or will see this, and I hope that they're not offended, but like my feedback for something will often be just cut half the words. Like looks good, cut half the words. There's no guidance on how.
And they could probably be random cuts too.
Yeah. But like, because like we're desperate to get people to respond to us. Like, and I assume, I mean, you work with outside collaborators too. Like, no one's job is to get back to us. So that they're like, one heuristically is like, just ruthlessly try see if you can cut words and not lose meaning. But then it's really this, and we'll go through it, and we'll go through it as an exercise. But it's really about trying to take the perspective of the recipient. Like, what are they, when they open this, what are they going to be seeing? So we'll show it now. Here's the terrible email sent to someone in attendance right now. I will not name you for mercy.
Nobody's listening. Everybody's trying to read 4 pages of text.
Yeah, we'll go do it together. We'll do it together. Exactly. It's 853 words, and it took me 10 minutes to read. And here, you don't have to read it. We're going to go paragraph there. This paragraph is just saying that that the leader, the sender of the email, had a great time whenever they all met. So a whole paragraph on that. The next is the least important thing in the whole paragraph, which I think is real in the whole email, which is hilarious. It's a list of gifts, and it's bullet pointed as if it's important. A list of all the gifts that were given to the new members of their group, and then the packaging for it. And then here's a request that this person makes for people to use a specific app, the private group. Here is just something nice about a dinner they had. Here is a report back on official business from the board. And then here is an official business item followed by a request for someone to volunteer somewhere in here. You don't have to read it. It took me a while to figure out. They're asking for a volunteer. And then here's the most important piece of information in there. Let the leader know whether this date works for the following meeting. You don't have to read it. We don't have time for that. But if Nick, if this showed up in your inbox, but remember, if it shows up in your inbox, it's only going to be like you're only going to see a list of gifts given to new members. How are you likely to respond?
Pushing the down arrow key to the next one.
Yeah, and yeah. No, but
I'll get back to it later, and then if it disappears on your visible inbox, it's lost for eternity. I worry.
Yeah, and there's one piece of urgent information here, which is like scheduling the next meeting,
and
it does look like they're looking for a new. So I didn't try to cut words because I think that there is some content. Like, I don't understand what the real goal of the sender is, whether it's like to send like enthusiasm and his or her own tone. So what I instead just did was I organized it by 3 actions needed from you. Please promote on the Facebook group. Can someone please volunteer to lead the system? Please let me know if those dates work. Below, I discussed these 3 items, and then I just organize them. And I move the least important. And then the thing that I actually think that the last thing I came up with was there's no reason you need to bullet point each gift. Each item of the 22 items given to new members needed bullet points, because the bullet point draws attention to it. And so like it just takes up too much space. So we just turn it into a sentence that no one will read. But then if there's a disclosure requirement, I don't know. I didn't cut words, which I think is really the most important part. But here I really just like when someone opens it, at least want them to know what we want them to do.
I think that's an important example to highlight, because a lot of the questions we also got, we'll get to this in a minute, are about whether there are trade-offs here. And I think we can all empathize with an email like this, because there are a lot of nice things you want to say. You want to reach out and communicate with people and talk with them and share news. But here's an example of how to just make what you're doing much clearer in a way that will be more effective. And it contains all of the sort of social stuff that's included in it as well, all the warmth that comes from just being nice and communicating.
I think that there is, you're not wrong to imagine there's a ruthlessness to cutting words, and that some of the warmth you described could be lost, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum situation. You can keep it there. You're just making the content much easier to grasp. or as psychologists will often refer to it as fluent. Just make it easier to process. You can do that in lots of ways. You did it by organizing it there. So sort of back to our initial question about how we do this better. So you've suggested some basic tips, some things that people can think about, sort of heuristics people can keep top of mind. But it occurred to me it's still going to be hard to take the reader's perspective because you're not in it, and you can't be in it. Like you can do better, but you ultimately can't understand how your email is going to be read by somebody who's not in your perspective, which I think is one reason why just having somebody proofread is important, and even edit for clarity is important, which is what you do when your students send you emails and you say cut it by half or whatever, to get the perspective of what a recipient of this email would actually experience when they see it.
Yeah, I think that's right. So the high level, what you're saying is we're not very good, even if we try to take people's perspectives.
We can still make mistakes even when you're trying to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually think that we can get a lot of the way there by just trying. I don't think we're trying, which is like, I hope that all the people listening to this and who encounter this research in the coming years, or next time, here's a cue. Next time you go in your inbox and you look at an email that's clearly something you need to read, but you move on to the next one, like take a second to like figure out why you didn't just read it. And yet you still know you have to. It's because it was like it was gonna take. It was just not clear what the purpose was, and but you need to find out what the purpose is. They basically they shifted the time burden onto you by not making it clear. But so you asked like how do we do this, and perspective taking can be flawed. But like here's a heuristic. Your recipient is going to be very busy, and your recipient is going to have other emails that he or she will be competing with yours. Like you don't need to do that much perspective taking to know that's the case. Yeah. And so you're competing with other things. So
it gives you a perspective to consider. Your listener is lying on the floor suffering from Zoom fatigue. Get that person to pay attention to this email. You probably do better.
Right. And I just want to preempt, not every communication has this goal, but a lot of our communications are trying to get people to respond and are soliciting something. And if that's the goal, then a good first take is take their perspective and realize that the odds are pretty good that they're going to be busy, that they're going to be racing through their emails, and that your email is competing with lots of other worthy communications. Or even better, time with loved ones, or things that are more fulfilling than reading your email.
But actually, it strikes me as a very interesting hypothesis that you may not yet have data for, about whether longer, wordier emails actually do convey more kindness or warmth or gratitude or whatever else it is we're trying to communicate. It's not obvious to me that's right. Like your more fluent email that you reorganized and showed us just a moment ago also seems like it would achieve a lot of those other goals potentially more effectively as well.
A lot of those other goals, you mean of warmth? And
or the other things we're trying to do in communication, or even convey that we care about something, or putting a stake in the ground, these other things that you mentioned.
Yeah, I guess that's right. One other way that it could, the way we would study it, you and I, if we were to do lab study, is we'd put these in front of people, have them read it. The problem is it's a two-stage problem. It's can you capture and maintain attention long enough to get the gist across? And then if you do, and if they are engaged, do they read the whole thing?
Yeah.
And it's possible that even at the second stage, a better, more concise or email will convey that I respect your time and that I put time into it.
And even conveys warmth in these other things as well, because people are even reading what you've written, whereas otherwise they might not. Yeah. All right. So I'm already thinking about a half dozen experiments we need to do together, Todd. But we'll talk about those later. Let's get to some of these other questions that we got that are relevant here.
Wait, can I, Nick, before can I just make It is. I want to reiterate the two-stage process part, which is this is like I used to do this stuff in politics, and for 15 years did political communications. And the like the hidden secret of it, especially when you're pushing information to people, whether it's like let's imagine it's a mailer, or even a TV ad, where can you capture and maintain attention long enough to get the information across? That's the first constraint, is do you capture and maintain attention long enough to get your information across? And a TV ad you can disengage from. A mailer you look at for 3 seconds before you throw it away. An email, I open it to figure out what it's about. I don't know, and then move on. And so like you got to get through that first stage. And if you don't, then at least you need to make sure that that first stage got the core information across. Please continue. Sorry.
I will, let me also highlight with that's a really important reason for studying effects out in the field, in the world. You can do lots of research where you don't witness that two-stage process because you make people pay attention to something in an experiment. And so just a shout out for doing that kind of out in the field sort of work. So there were a number of questions in addition to the how-to that I would categorize as what about kinds of questions, which are, what about this effect or that effect or this consequence that maybe you hadn't talked about? And one of those was whether you think these principles apply to other ways of communicating with other people. On the phone, say, when we pick up and call somebody, or when we're meeting in person, should we be thinking about our more informal communications in the same way?
So let's be concrete. You and I are colleagues, and we bump into each other in the coffee room. If I have an so again, I am restricting to a space where I need you to get something done. Obviously me just coming in, damn it, Nick, I need you to fill that thing, like that, probably coming in hot isn't the ideal strategy.
Yeah. But short might be, damn it, I need you to fill this thing out.
Yeah. That would be concise. That would be the concise, yeah. the more concise. I mean, it depends what our objective is. And I had a friend who, when he became a management consultant, like had this norm of like writing an outline before leaving voicemails. And he told this, he was like me, not a New Yorker reader, and said that when I leave rambling messages, this is literally a quote. When I leave rambling voicemail messages, this is, obviously I graduated a long time ago. We left voicemail messages. When I leave rambling voicemail messages, it tells him that I don't value his time. And I mean, it's not quite a social. So then I would leave him. I would give him. So then I would leave him 10-minute voicemail messages. But eventually, when I conformed to his objectives or his criteria, I mean, it would still be social content in there. It was more structured. But I also don't want to like impose structure. Like some of the best conversation, if we were going for a walk with no goal in mind at all, is just free, association. But I'm not trying to get you to do stuff then.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's just connecting. And there's a different goal there. And there, more conversation is probably better. Like in our walk and talk we had a week or so ago, which was great fun. I did get a call the other night from a company asking me to fill out a survey, which I had already agreed to do. And I answered the phone, and there was talking. I looked at the phone, and it was 30 seconds, and they still hadn't asked me a single question. And I'm just ask me the questions. I will answer them. And it was a minute. They had not gotten to the questions, and then I was done. And I already agreed to answer the question. So one thing that seems important is whether the person you're communicating with can act on that first filter you described, which is just cutting off, right? If you don't have attention, you're not going to pay attention. You're not even going to get the message. If you run into me in the faculty lounge, I'm probably not going to say bye and leave in the middle of conversation. So that would be a context where more could be said and maybe the effectiveness wouldn't be lost. But in a case like a voicemail message or a phone call where somebody could drop off from, or a Zoom call like this one, you might experience those negative consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so, okay. So that's the interpersonal live, even dyadic interactions. But like in our family, we have a to-do list that is kept in Google Keep. And so people can update it. And like, if it is multiple lines long, it's very often that I'm going to skip reading it and go to the short option on the to-do list before the long one. Like, and we're talking, it takes 3 seconds, probably exactly 3 seconds to read the 2-line one, but I'm going to skip it. And that's, but again, it's just, if you took my perspective, you would just realize like, he's going to jump around to like, and I don't think I'm the only one who would jump around to the things that are easiest to comprehend before getting to the harder to comprehend. And that's not quite an interaction, but it's not an email or a text.
Yeah, right. Lots of interactions look like that, where you could cut off the interaction, or the communication, not pay attention. We do we do have a number of questions about whether there's sort of a dark side to brevity, and you touched on this a bit about. So one person, for instance, how do you balance being concise and polite in an email to a superior, especially when asking for a favor? Another person wrote, I believe in succinct writing. However, some find it blunt and offensive. I see it as saving time. So there's a perspective gap, right, between two. Another wrote, I justify some ramblings as wanting to be warm and human. Are there tricks to being concise while still being you?
Those are great. Those are great. I always reserve, even in the lab where we have a 3 to 5 sentence max, the first sentence is always a warmth social message, for exactly the reason of like bluntness. I don't have good evidence, although you could imagine it wouldn't be that hard to test, like that adding a vacuous warm message just in like 5 words. Hope you're well. Please fill out my survey. Hope you're well. Please pay your debt. Yeah, I mean, but I think that they're not wrong. Like the risk of cutting of losing warmth. But I think as we talked about, you can keep it. I mean, Strunk, the elements of style, omit needless words. Those are needless words. And I'm saying you can even cut more, I think, but there doesn't have to be the trade-off.
Yeah. I think one challenge is that the words that we produce seem more valuable. And so it's hard to identify which ones are needless. Like every author has experienced this, right? That editing is hard because you love the words you came up with, and you can't cut. It's hard to do because you value those words in a way that a reader might not. That seems very challenging.
Yeah, though any psychologist, or I'm sure other fields have the same thing. Nick and I are sometimes write for a journal like Psych Science, which has a cap on the number of words, and the experience of having to add something and then needing to stay under the word cap, like it really is pretty eye-opening. That I don't think I lost anything. I just cut out redundancy. Like
Right.
that cap really sort of like is eye-opening, and I assume people in other fields experience it too.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to be cognizant of people's time, including yours. It is 7 o'clock, which is at least in Chicago, 8 o'clock where you are, Todd. So I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna thank you again for spending time with us tonight. It's always so much fun to talk with you and to hear what you're up to and the impact that you're having on the world. And I want to thank all of the audience members who stuck with us tonight during these hard times. We hope you're staying well and hanging in there as best you can. We will look forward to seeing you on February 17th when Ayelet Fishbach joins us. And until then, please do your best to stay well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.